You know?
Sometimes I do both. It's the case.
Yeah.
Well, if it's a long message, don't put that in text. You know, if you're seeing an email, just point me to the email and I'll find it.
Yeah, but it's very short. I mean, you'll figure it out.
All right. And also, Mark, thank you. You were right. I did skip a koan. Since I had read and studied it, I imagined that I gave that talk. I did not in reality.
Well, I couldn't imagine that we had a discussion.
I can't tell you how disappointed I was. I had studied that koan and then
I didn't know about it.
you didn't do it.
Yeah.
Okay, good. I thought,
Yeah. So, yeah, because you said that last week and I went, I could have sworn we talked about that koan. And in my delusion, we did. All right. So we're going back one. Case number 32, a non-Buddhist questions Buddha. So this title is really weird because they didn't call themselves Buddhists back then. The word Buddhism didn't come into usage until the 19th century. It first appears in writing in 1801, so which means it was probably in usage the last part of the 18th century, and then so by 19th century it became common parlance, but 2,500 years ago they did not use that term. So a non-practitioner of the way is probably the way it would have been expressed. Questions the Buddha. So the main case. A non-Buddhist in all earnestness asked the world-honored one, I do not ask about words. I do not ask about no words. The world-honored one just sat still. The non-Buddhist praised him, saying, the world-honored one, in his great benevolence and great mercy, has opened the clouds of my delusion and enabled me to enter the way. Then, bowing, he took his leave. Ananda asked Buddha, what did the non-Buddhist realize that made him praise you so much? The world-honored one replied, he's just like a fine horse that runs even at the shadow of a whip. Mumon's commentary. Ananda is Buddha's disciple, but his realization is less than the non-Buddhists. Now tell me, how far is the distance between the non-Buddhist and the Buddhist disciple? The verse. Walking on the edge of a sword, running over a ridge of jagged ice, not using steps or ladders, jumping from the cliff with hands free. Sounds like a daredevil. One of the younger members of my tea group, he's this daredevil kid. He started practicing tea when he was 9. And he would literally, from the second floor, jump over the banister and spring off the various beams to get down to the first floor instead of using the stairs. So that's what I thought of when I read that verse, walking on the edge of the sword, running over the ridge of jagged ice. And there are pictures of him doing all kinds of daredevil things on mountains and ski slopes. So, but he's alive and well and creating amazing art. He graduated cum laude from the art center, and he's an amazing kid. I feel honored to have known him since he was 9 years old. So, unfortunately, what most people see as obvious in this koan is not the answer. Sometimes the answers are very obvious. In this case, people will say, Zazen is the answer, or stillness is the answer, or the silence is the answer. But we're talking about someone who was probably a practitioner of one of the other religions in India at the time, Jain, and there were several other Hindus, Jains, and those are the two main religions. But there are many other types of practices, yogic practices, and all this stuff going on. So this guy was really probably some kind of philosopher who had heard about Buddha and had not engaged in any sort of Buddhist practice, showed up as just a member of the audience and asked him this question. So what does someone, that's why they're kind of emphasizing that he is a non-Buddhist or someone who is outside of the way. He's not a practitioner and wasn't familiar with the practice. So what does a non-Buddhist see when they see you practice? Or when they see the Buddha practice, because it's you who practicing as the Buddha. That's where you put yourself in this koan. Then you put yourself in the place of someone who is watching you or observing you. And they're saying, well, show me. What is it about your practice that's so good? Why do you go sit quietly for 7 days on a mountaintop and you complain about all that pain, but you keep going? What are you doing? What are you seeing? And what are they seeing of you? So that's where you enter in this koan, is as the Buddha and as the person seeing the Buddha. And this is, obviously, because when I tell people that I sit in silence for several days in a row, they're like, oh, I could never do that. And there's several of my friends that I agree, they could never do that. It would send them over the edge to try to sit quietly for any period of time. So, they're asking me, well, what do I get out of it? So, me sitting quietly, because I am the quintessential introvert, is not a big stretch for me. But just sitting quietly is not the point of this sitting. It's not what you get. You don't get quiet. If you're already quiet, it's fine. If you aren't quiet, then you get quiet. There's something else. There's something else going on with what you are experiencing, what you are learning, what you are manifesting as the Buddha sitting. That's what this non-Buddhist saw instantly. So he's sitting there doing zazen, meaningless. So what did he see? And that kind of broke him through, this experience of being in the way. And why didn't Ananda, who is Buddha's cousin and disciple, and had been practicing with the Buddha for however many years at this point, he may have been very young. This was obviously before his enlightenment experience, but Ananda didn't have his enlightenment experience until after the Buddha died. So this is sometime before that. Because his enlightenment experience was with Mahakashapa. So put yourself in that place too. What are you missing? How are you misusing the practice? Because obviously he's been practicing all this time and not seeing something, which is something you can do. The commentary talks about, I think it's Aiken Roshi's commentary, talks about Uji Zen, people who sit just for peace and tranquility, which you can do. Zazen will do that for you, but it's just one very small aspect of the practice. And certainly we all need, especially these days, some peace and quiet. So it's nice to, sit and just be peaceful and let all the news reports go and not have them invade your space. But is that all that the sitting is doing for you? Is there something more? And these horse reference is from one of the Buddha sutras in which Buddha talks about different levels of experience. It's not intended as comparison, but just people who are just different in the way they experience life. So a person who really gets this level of impermanence and the tenuousness of life because they've heard of someone's death maybe in their village or in their town or in their city, and they have this deep experience of this is where we're all going to end up. Not everyone's, most people are like, oh well, they died over there, he was old, should have died anyway. So that's the person who has that deep experience from a distance, is the horse that runs at just the sound of the whip. So they hear this, I need to pay attention and really go deep into what I'm taking care of. The second horse is the one who has that experience of impermanence, of tenuousness of life, when they know someone, friend, relative, or is that the second one? Third one. So fourth one, so the fourth one, the first one, the one who runs with the sound of the whip is the one who knows that people died. They don't necessarily have a personal relationship. The second one is the one who knows is the one in the village, and that's the one. The whip just touches the hair, so doesn't hit them. The first one just heard the sound and started to run. The second one, the whip touches just flicks the hair. I have no hair, so it hit my head. But if I had long hair. Second, that's third one is someone who experiences that because they know the person who died was a relative, and that's the one who the horse that runs with the whip touching the skin. The fourth one doesn't get it until they are facing themselves. That's the one who the horse that runs when the whip hits the bone. So they're just different levels of experience. They're not considered to be one better than the other. It's just that's how different people experience. Buddhism tends to be the religion of last resort, and people get to that last resort, and because they have this personal experience, or death is now very clear to them, and either really personal or close enough personal that they've now come to the practice.
Could you also say that there are levels of consciousness? So the person who is, sort of the highest level of consciousness experiences the pain of all people, whether you know them or not. They know pain exists.
Yeah, you said. Yeah.
They don't need to have an immediacy in that person, or even knowing the village where the person came from, or feeling it themselves, but they feel the pain of the world.
Yeah, that's Avalokiteshvara.
Yeah.
Or Kuan Yin. That's very she or he hears the pains of the world, and responds, because 1,000 eyes, 1,000 hands, 1,000 ears, and so they immediately respond to all of that pain, take care of it. But yes, you could call it that level. I would shy away from words like high and low, because it gets to be this comparative. It is that level of empathy, if you will.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's where that references at the end of like a fine horse that runs even at the shadow of the whip, or in other places it's like sound of the whip. So that's what this person was. He had no direct experience with the practice, and hadn't practiced before, but got it just with what the Buddha was demonstrating in that moment. Did that all from memory, and I have it all underlined. The horses. Hey, when that happens. So that's basically what this koan is about. Is why are you sitting? Why are you doing this practice? What are you seeing? What is it you are directly experiencing when you do zazen, when you're sitting still? And what are you showing the world? What do your friends say, or your family, when they see you sitting? Do they just ignore you because you've been doing it all this time? So, or are they seeing the source of a way of interacting with the world that works? So,
can I ask a historical question?
please.
Um,
I don't know if I know it, the
so
history
the,
of it.
the parable of the Buddha.
Mhm.
I think in a lot of religious traditions, there are these parables or stories that are taught, and obviously the koan tradition hasn't been something that's always been around. There was a more academic kind of version of Buddhism, or more intellectual version that preceded the advent of koan practice.
Yeah.
And can you speak to that a little bit, just to understand that more clearly about how koans contrast with intellectual reflections on different kinds of...
Yeah. Well, I think that it would be fair to say that koans existed before the word koan. It didn't get codified until you get to 9th, 10th century, start codified until 9th, 10th century China. They didn't have a koan system in India. That doesn't mean that they didn't have koans, because koans are just experiential riddles. So certainly all through the sutras, the Lotus Sutra, the Diamond Sutra, all those other sutras, you'll read passages that sound like koans. They're asking you to directly experience what it is they're saying in the text. So was it more intellectual? Some might say that. I've heard historians describe it as being a much more intellectual, much more rule-oriented type practice. When you talk about the Theravadan tradition, a very orthodox in that sense. But that's just one particular school. So you really didn't have a quote unquote Zen school in India. The Zen school really, it started there. The practice is the same as it was in India, but it wasn't a separate category. Because Buddhism splintered out of India, parts of it went to Southeast Asia, the other part went west to China. What came west to China, probably just because of the culture of the Chinese, because they had long had a system of codifying philosophical practices, going long before Confucian and Taoism and all that. That already existed, and it's really hard to extract those influences from Mahayana Buddhism today. It's a complete hybrid of that system, and that's the tradition that we come through. That went west to China, Japan, now the Americas. In that system, there is this koan system in the Renzai school. It's not really a Soto school, because then it splits further, Vipassana Soto and Renzai, and the Soto school really didn't adopt a formal koan system, but because this tradition has transmission from both Renzai and Soto, we do the koan system. It continues to get modified, so because there's no central body that's kind of regulating that. So yeah, I've read descriptions that said there was a much more intellectual approach to Buddhism back in Buddha's day, and that may have been the case, because there were a lot of philosophical schools around at that time, and there still are in India, and India being one of the oldest extant cultures on the planet. And their stuff is still evolving, and Buddhism has pretty much died out in India. So, however, there was still this emphasis on direct experience. There has been from the beginning. That fundamental process started by the Buddha, that hasn't changed. How we've approached it, or the methodologies we employ to break through into direct experience probably are a little bit evolved from that point. But the fundamental principle of life is direct experience, seeing into your true nature, was what Buddha did. I mean, he had tried all those other practices, including practically killing himself, starving himself to death and falling into the river, and what was her name? I would say Jakarta. That's the country. I can't remember the milkmaid's name. The milkmaid who rescued him. He realized, okay, this is not working. And sat to directly experience his true nature under the Bodhi tree. And that fundamental process has remained consistent, for 2,500 years. So we've employed a few other, as Maizumi Roshi would call them, gimmicks. Because he says, he describes Zazen as a gimmick. And it is. It's a way of tricking your body into being present in the moment. You're always present in the moment. You just think you're not present in the moment. But there's no way out of being present in the moment. But we use all kinds of tactics to think otherwise. So we have to do all this work to be present. And it works for the most part. At least it works for me. This is why I do this. That's why I'm here. And in the koans, Tenshin Roshi's description of koans is it makes unevenness even, and I think it gives you entree into not only your own direct experience, but your direct experience of other people's situations, and being able to put yourself over, in that person's place and experience your true nature from that perspective. Because all this oneness doesn't mean sameness. So just because I have this perspective of my own true nature doesn't mean that I have everybody else's perspective on the same thing. Being able to expand that perspective to others' experience, in as much as it's possible to do that, is what koans do. So putting myself in the place of Ananda, seasoned practitioner, still not enlightened, into this non-practitioner, instant enlightenment, and to the Buddhist perspective as being the teacher, having worked this out, done the work, done the struggle, done the process to really come to this practice, and now is teaching it and demonstrating it to this person who has no experience with the practice, and to Ananda, who should know better. Too busy womanizing, because that's what he was known for.
This can remind me of the Yeshe Kosinski book. You can get a movie called Being There with Chauncey Gardner. That's right. And he was just a simple gardener, but everyone attributed all these amazing wisdom to him, because he would say, they would say, well, what should I do in this situation? He would say something like, the grass grows green. And, all he knew was gardening.
Yeah.
Right, but he took it all as like these amazing metaphors. I think Peter Sellers played this character.
That sounds like a Peter Sellers role. Yeah.
Chauncey Gardner.
Yeah.
And so this one is too, in the sense that what we know about the story is that this non-practitioner, asks his own question and answers his own question in a heartbeat. And all of the Buddha just sits there and nothing happens, but there's an awakening on the part of the non-practitioner. Essentially, he answers his own question, in my estimation. And so his answer is not knowing is the most intimate. That's what I took from that. It's like, okay, it's not letters and it's not non-letters. What is it? It's something else. I don't know what this is, but it's the vastness of emptiness. So no holiness, vast emptiness. That's, I think what comes out of that. Whether that lasts or not, who knows? But there's that insight. It's not this and it's not that. I don't know what this is.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with it, and I'm going to go with that.
Yeah, I mean, that's one way to put it, because he doesn't say what he got.
Yeah.
He just got it.
You just got it like
So, yeah, I would.
But he was satisfied with whatever the answer was that he got out of it.
He was, yeah. But we don't know what he got out of it. So your proposal is possible.
Yeah.
So
That's what I would.
Yeah.
It's my own experience.
Yeah.
This practice is not knowing is the most intimate, and it throws us into this world of being awakened, where we simply experience life as it happens.
Yeah.
And don't avoid and don't attach judgments and opinions and all that to it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, what is your true nature? What is the direct experience of your true nature before words?
Yeah. It's whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's not. It's what I make of it. It's what it is. As I experience it. And, being present is what we practice in some sense.
It is. Yeah. And definitely that is what the Buddha is demonstrating. He didn't try to argue with him or convince him or convert him or proselytize to him. The Buddha let this other person experience him, and he got to experience this other person directly, without explanations or stories. And it's this pure mind-to-mind transmission at that point. Now,
Maybe we don't know.
we don't know. So, but the Buddha seemed to think that he got it. I mean, this person praised the Buddha and left, and Ananda was like, WTF. What do you see? What am I missing? And the Buddha just says, he's like that horse that the shadow of the whip. He got it. He got that, life is what it is. Because the Buddha, I mean, his awakening came through literally escaping from his privilege as a prince. And I think that's what we get to do when we put ourselves in this practice is we escape our privilege. Our privilege allows us to not pay attention, to not have to really do anything about what's going on in the world. I don't have to listen to what Trump is doing. I don't have to pay attention to it at all. I just go on with my life and not take any action.
Which a lot of people are doing.
Yeah, and I certainly understand why, because that's what I would rather be doing. But but being present is really, as you described earlier, hearing the cries of the world, the pain of the world. There's a lot of pain being created right now. And how do we use this practice to take care of that? That's I think you have to pay attention to what's going on. You can't just stick your head in the hole, comfortable though that hole may be, and just stay escaped. You also may not be in a position to be able to do radical things about it, but you can do something, even if it's just, taking care of yourself as this is causing yourself stress. So it's but being present, and I think that's, and I directly experienced that, with people coming into my office who I just sitting there, just being present with them, and we didn't have to say much, and I've gotten that same sort of, oh, thank you so much for listening. I was like, thank you for helping. I'm like, I didn't do anything.
I figured it out.
Yeah, they talked themselves out of their problem just by me sitting there listening. So certainly gratifying for me. I'm glad I helped you. Don't know what I did, but just being present. And sometimes that's the best thing you can do is just be present. And it's really what this practice is about. It is the practice of being present all the time and trying to really get out of our heads and our excuses and our long ass explanations about everything and just take care of what is right there in front of him. So I would imagine that was a very intense moment, and who knows how long, how many seconds, how many minutes there was in that exchange. So it's hard to tell from this, but it sounds like it was pretty short. It was this instantaneous connection between the two. Both of them seeing their true nature, and it was directly experienced. It was, and probably being directly expressed, but we don't have words in this koan, probably intentionally, that describe that experience. So we don't know what that experience was for either side of that koan. Ananda was not happy that that person who hadn't been practicing got it, and he was like, "What about me?" And still, the Buddha didn't tell Ananda, well, this is what it is. This is why it worked. There was not this prescriptive explanation to Ananda, and it took Ananda. And I think Ananda is that example of the very smart person who is so stuck in his head that he can't get past his own thoughts. And was it eidetic memory? He had a photographic memory, or he had this 100% recall. So 100% that even things that he didn't hear, he recalled. So that, and it's because of Ananda that we have all these sutras, because nothing was written down during Buddha's lifetime. It was after Buddha's death, Kassapa called together the council of elders, if you will, whatever they call that group, and said, we need to write this down. And Ananda recalled all of his talk, everything he said, and verbatim, and just wrote it down, and everyone else says, oh yeah, I remember that too, but you remember so much more detail than I did. So that's why all the sutras start with, thus I have heard, because it's Ananda recalling all of that. So smart, so brilliant, apparently very attractive, all the women loved him. And when the conversation about allowing women in the Sangha, Ananda was all over it. Yeah, we need the women. Well, Kassapa was like, hell no. We have enough distraction going on in here. No women. Yes.
So I just had a koan-like experience, not right this second, but we're sitting in new space, and I needed the bathroom.
Yeah.
I went to the bathroom that was normally the bathroom that I would use. The first time I went in the building, when I first drove in, before I used the bathroom, they said, you got to use the other room. We're using that little kind of thing there. And then I went and I saw her off in the distance, and I like to presence mode. I get kind of, that's where it is. I mean, I'm a guest in somebody else's house. And then I said, all right, if I use the bathroom. And it was interesting because though she's the host, allowing us to be here, there's almost instantaneously some level of discomfort about place, about perspective, about these different things. And I think for me,
and the dress you were wearing.
yeah, now it was wearing my black dress.
Yes.
And it was just a really interesting moment of immediate recognition of her discomfort, and that was okay.
Yeah.
And then she said, "There's 2 bathrooms in this building," and then after, "Oh, I'll just use this bathroom." Is that okay? She said, "Okay." I said, "Okay, use the bathroom." I hope I don't get us thrown out here. But I think that where it connects with this is there's that that level of presence. I'm not filled with pride about this. I'm just saying that
Yeah.
I went in there just not knowing, and hey, and it was interesting to feel what came up in that very, very short interaction, similar to what must have been the case in the poem.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there are these moments that we have all the time in which we're someplace unknown and we have to pay attention because we don't know. That's why not knowing is most intimate, because you're like, okay, is this the right place? Is this the wrong place? Is this dangerous? Is this all these unanswered questions? You're not walking into something familiar that you can just ignore and take for granted. You're walking into a new situation that you have to pay. That is being true, being present in the situation and trying to understand what's going on. So we do. There's no way out of our present moment, but we're not always paying attention to it. And but when we can call on that attention at any time, especially if it's a teaching moment, because someone coming to the Buddha, and a lot of times these days, people are not asking questions because they want your answer. They're asking questions because they want to find a way of telling you that they're right and you're wrong. So Ananda's question is sincere in that sense. He's like, what did he get? I don't understand. From this complete space of, I've been doing this for years, and why did he get it and I didn't? He wasn't challenging. He wasn't saying, who's that loser? It was like, okay, he clearly praised the Buddha. Clearly, he felt something. What was that?
It's, I find in this practice, it's almost impossible to say what it is or give an objective answer to those questions.
Yeah.
So all we can kind of do is kind of the not knowing experience, that not knowing is most intimate experience, that words and letters are not the way.
Yeah.
No words and no letters are not the way.
Yeah.
There's something else. What is it?
It's a teaching beyond words and letters.
Yeah.
That's Bodhidharma. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's almost that it's not really it's not possible to give a it's 5 o'clock at the answer.
Yeah.
You can't do that.
42.
42.
Yeah. It is. That's why, unfortunately, Buddhism often gets described more by what it isn't, by what it's not, rather than what it is. Because it's almost impossible to say what it is, because what it is moved on.
It's a hard teacher.
Yeah. So yeah, you're right. It's hard to talk about this, and that question from the Chapman student, comes up for me occasionally in Zazen. So what do Buddhists believe? And I was like, I'll get back to you. Don't know. Because I don't use this descriptor very much anymore, but earlier in my practice, I described Zazen as being a form of deconstruction. So it was a practice of undoing all of my thoughts about life, myself, and all that stuff. So it was deconstructing, because I built up this construct of me. And Zazen served as the process to undo all that. So it sounds people often hear destructive when I say deconstruction. So I stopped using that term. So I thought, okay, that doesn't work. Let me find a different way to describe this. Because it's not destructive. Working through, and you don't really get rid of it. You just work through those layers that we have, these various identities that we have of ourselves. They're not real. They serve a purpose, and we go through those various purposes in our life. And I went through my 40 years with Kaiser, and that served its purpose. Gave me a good pension, which I'm very thankful for. But it no longer, people still try to tap into my HR background occasionally, but that identity no longer functions in my life. And we had this huge discussion at the White Plum meeting on racism that was led by Showa from San Diego. I'm going to Sweetwater tomorrow to be guest speaker there. And I was thinking about that because I have been invited several times to talk about Buddhism from a Black perspective, and I declined those invitations because I have no idea what that means. First of all, because I've never been the other color. So how do I talk about that perspective without comparing it to some other perspective? And I can't compare it to any other perspective. So there's just me doing this practice. And so when people ask me that question, I'm saying, I honestly, I don't know. I mean, I could make that up, practicing is. And early on I did, they had me write, I probably told the story about my ZMI experience. There was a kid in the ZMI
UCLA. At UCLA?
No, yes, at UCLA, Zen Centers Los Angeles. When I first went, the first Zen meditation instruction class I went to, there was someone in the class who said, the instructor asked, why are you interested in Buddhism? And his answer to the question was, because Buddha was white. So.
But he really wasn't.
Yeah, no, he wasn't. And everybody was like, so I don't know, and my brain just automatically dismissed him. I was not at all bothered by his answer. However, that word got out that had happened in that class, and a couple of weeks later when I came back, people were like, "Oh, are you okay?" And I'm like, it took me a while to figure out why. Oh yeah, that idiot. So it didn't. So I never had to use the identifiers African American in a Zen context. I've never had to conjure up that construct, and it took me a while to realize that's why I can't talk about it, because I don't think of that. That identifier doesn't function in this setting, which is an interesting thing to say, because I'm sure that if I said that to my African American friends, they would be like, "What? There's a time in your life when you're not Black?" No, there's no time. That's the point. Is that there's never a time when I'm not practicing as this, but it doesn't. But I have nothing to compare it to. So there's just this. So I don't get the question. And people don't get that I don't get the question. So I'm sorry. Anyway, I digress.
But you surely have experienced racism.
Yeah, but not in Zen circles.
No,
and not as a Zen
sure,
practitioner.
Huh?
Not as a Zen practitioner.
Not as a Zen practitioner.
Yeah. So, I understand the experience of racism, because I went to a very upper middle class, predominantly white private Christian school.
Yeah.
So
Ground zero.
exactly. So, need I say more? So this was in Glendale, and at that time, there was they said there was a law. There was no law. There was a law that any people of color had to be out of the city limits of Glendale after sunset.
Yeah.
People thought that was a law. It never was.
Signal Hill, yeah.
Yeah,
Same thing, Signal Hill.
that was kind of the folklore. So yeah,
But they
you know,
had,
when
I think they had restricted covenants for a long time.
they did, oh yeah, there's no way.
Everywhere does in Southern California.
Yeah,
Everywhere in Southern California does.
they're not enforced, but the redlining was real.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
And my friends bought a house up in the hills somewhere, and she has the original deed that basically says this house is not to be sold to this list of people. Exactly. Yeah. So that was very real. Anyway, I want to give you a quick update on your Koji, but questions about this koan before we close.
So, really basic question, how are we supposed to work with this koan?
Put yourself in. What is your experience of a non-practitioner looking at a practitioner? So you're both. You put yourself in both of those roles and those experiences. So you probably remember what it was like before you practiced, to a little bit anyway. And you now know what it's like to be a practitioner. So you can put yourself in the place of the non-practitioner and of the Buddha. And most people have had the experience of being, especially in some sanghas. Daido Lori was famous for this. He would seat people in order of who had passed moon. So people were, so there was this hierarchy in the Zendo of people thought, well, those are the really good people because they passed moon first, and then the people way down the line they're not as good. So whatever. So Ananda probably felt like that person who was not only was last on the list, but hadn't passed me, so wasn't even on the line yet. So, and we've all been in that place of, other people being more enlightened than. So that's the Ananda experience. So what is your direct experience of those three different positions? That's how koans work. You experience each of the characters or each part of the dialogue.
So there's subtlety and complexity. The complexity we know is Buddha's looking at the non-Buddhist, non-Buddhist looking at the Buddha, Buddha's looking at all of them. They share some kind of a grounding resonance that's also there.
Yeah.
As a location or sense of place.
So yes, so that's so we tend to look at those three different positions as being uneven, different. How are they that? Yes, but how are they not that? How are they the same? How are they part of the oneness? Oneness does not mean sameness. So how, in their unique perspectives, are they not separate, and not different?
Pernicious oneness.
Yes, you're in
Not my
that.
quote.
Yeah, Yamada Roshi. Yeah, people who want everyone to be one like them. There's only one way to be one.
I would say also your example of the bathroom over the other kind of, my experience of the group that runs the place in the Pacific Coast, people that are fairly uptight about boundaries.
You think?
Yeah, and so I thought, well, probably we can use bathrooms, I'm sure, and then I thought again, you know what, these people are uptight about these things, so probably not a good idea, just because they're, we're guests in their home, but that's my awareness of what those folks, despite we're all spiritual beings, they're actually hearing a Buddhist lecture today, maybe even more ironic.
Oh, they are.
Yes, because he's doing a series of workshops on maybe like compassionate caring or something. I guess bathroom usage doesn't really come within that, but yeah, that's.
Do you have to be a member of that congregation to sit in on that?
No,
They'll probably let anybody in.
they would love us to come.
For me, it'd be interesting to see what they're taking.
No,
I wouldn't argue with them.
we're invited to go and, I think sit in and listen to the event.
And we've invited them to join us as well. So.
I have an experience that relates to this. I've taken this life drawing class, and for midterm, we're supposed to do something like drawing that is a depiction. So I did this the picture of 5 Buddhas, and I actually used that statue as a model for the head only. But 4 of them were monoprints, and a monoprint is it's one of a kind. You know, you do it on gel, and then you pull or you pull off. And then the middle one was one that was drawn. So it was basically 5 Buddhas, 1 in the middle, and then 4 in each corner. And they all came out with different expressions. But the one in the middle, I made really serene. So I was supposed to explain to the class that, you know, when I showed this thing, supposed to explain, okay, what is it? You know, because it's a class, you know, and so I spent the whole time talking about what Buddhism wasn't. Not a spirit, not a God, not a this, not a that, none of that, you know. So it was like really interesting. So I left them with this like, huh? Yeah. But anyway, so
It's like
exactly what you said.
yeah, the woman who runs the assisted living facility where my mother is staying had no concept what Buddhism was. As a matter of fact, I told her I was a Zen Buddhist, and the look on her face, she just blazed over and going, "Yeah, you've never heard of that, have you?" And she said, "No." So I tried to briefly explain. The next week I came back and said, "So you're Muslim?"
One of those weird religions.
She still doesn't get it. She's very nice though. And she has Christian television. She's got 4 huge screens for all of the people she has. It's all on Christian station.
Koji. Captain Koji.
Oh, let's do vows and then we'll talk about your Cody. So thank you, everybody. Sentient beings are numberless. I vow to save them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to put an end to them. The dharmas are boundless. I vow to master them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to attain it. Sentient beings are numberless. I vow to save them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to put an end to them. The dharmas are boundless. I vow to master them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to attain it. Sentient beings are numberless. I vow to save them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to put an end to them. The dharmas are boundless. I vow to master them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to attain. Okay. We need a bell lesson. And we need a bell. Just for everybody, not just you. So the trick to this, and I do need to buy, I have some leather somewhere. I need to re-leather. There are parts of this that are softer than other parts you want to find. So where it's been hit a lot, you can see it's really hard. But you can hit it on the outside because it has an overtone series that you can hear very clearly. When you hit it really hard, it cuts off the overtone series. So you want to hear more of that bell. So either broad part on the outside or inside. It's a little bit louder on the inside than it is on the outside. And a gats is a deliberate gats. And the way it's done is it's down and roll. Gats. That's what stops the bell. But that's a particular sound that you make. It's not a silencing of the bell. It's a sound that you make with the bell. There's another sound that we don't use here because we don't do this chant, but you actually hold the bell with you. That's why the priest's robes are so long, sleeves are so long because you hold it. and you let your hand slides down as it makes contact. So it rings a little bit and then gets stopped with our fist. We only do that when we're chanting the names of the Buddha. But so when it's a GOTS, so with the let's start with the Heart Sutra. It's 3 rings on the bell. 1, 2, 3, GOTS, bunk. Then announce it. Raha Prajna Paramita Heart Sutra. Okay. And for the 4 vows, 1 bell, GOTS, bell. And then at the end, to silence it, use a cloth or something. You want to not put your oils on the hands, but silence it with something. At the end of the Heart Sutra, where that symbol is a little bit different from the others, that's to silence the bell. Not a GOTS, but just quiet. Okay. Remember that, because all of you need to do this. Okay. Thank you. Yokoji. So I was up there yesterday, and so we're moving into the last 10 days that Yozen, the office manager, will be there, because he's given notice and is leaving. So Joe Kai and I are going to share that responsibility, and so I'm madly trying to learn all these procedures. Fortunately, it's not that many. Once I get used to it, it's taking me a long time because I'm not used to it. It's all new to me. And it's very convoluted because they're using systems that have been cobbled together over the years. There's probably a much better way to do this, but this is not the time to change. So I will manage this, and everything is now, I can access it remotely, except for QuickBooks. They tried to migrate it to the online version, and they lost a whole bunch of data. So they had to go back, and they're going to do it again after the end of the month when they close out the monthly books. So I will have access to QuickBooks starting in July, online. So that'll be done remotely, so I'm not going to spend any more time with it than I already am, which is Fridays and Sundays. Joe Kai and I will share that responsibility until hopefully there's no person in the hopper right now, but we're hoping that person will appear. We've certainly sent out the appeal, the request that someone step up and take this over. So in meeting with there are 4 senseis of the Tenshin successors who are fairly local, Joe Kai, myself, Shigen sensei, and Yugen sensei, Jim Leckie, and Tom Bartholomew. You know people's Dharma names for so long, you forget what their other names are. Jim's in San Diego right now, so he's no longer that local. But so it's really Joe Kai and I are the ones that are within. Well, Shigen's in Redlands, but he's also still working, so he works a full-time job. So we meet on a regular basis to kind of talk about. So we have written proposals for the board to take care of Tenshin's retirement and to help Yokai with his transition. Those were the main issues that were on the table. We've got a plan to take care of the office interim, and there is a process in place for the volunteers to slot in. So we have a volunteer coordinator. The job description book is the overview is finished. The details we're still working on, like the specific checklist for each task that's on that list. But the overview it's being probably up on the web by today. It's going up on the web, so it'll be available to anyone who wants to come and volunteer. We go through that coordinator. So the 3rd weekend of every month through the rest of the year is a work practice weekend. So this weekend is the 3rd weekend. So every month until we've now scheduled that through the end of 2025. And that will be coordinated with the Karine. It's her name. She's the volunteer coordinator. She's sending out a survey. I think it went out yesterday, or it's going out today. Skill survey. Here's the jobs that we have. What skills do you have? And there's plenty of jobs for people who have no skills. It's not required. But if you have your really, special skills, like if you know how to use a chainsaw, because not very many people have that skill or should be using chainsaws. Because there is clearing that has to be done. That's probably fire abatement is probably the most important job we do up there. So making sure that we have people who can actually safely operate those tools to keep that going. We've got weed whackers and chainsaws and all that stuff, and it's used, on a daily basis to keep stuff clear. Because it's 160 acres that we have to, take care of. So all that's in place, and it's so far they had 15 people up there this weekend. Alex is one of them. That's where he is, helping out with. I don't know if they all showed up. There are 15 people on the list who are going out this weekend to do the work. Their main focus this weekend was it's now time for the Department of Health to come do the inspection of the kitchen. So making sure that all that stuff is in place and ready for the inspectors. So it gets inspected several times during the year for different things. So so far so good. The morale is a little better. I think that change is hard, and people were upset, and they were kind of sniping at each other for a while. It's part of the grief process. Things seem to have calmed down. People are better. Tension and Jokai are getting along better because they weren't for a minute. But it's good that they are. I think they're. We're figuring out how to do this and stay open. So there's whether or not this will be sustainable still remains to be seen. The other parts that are still coming up is moving a lot of stuff online, more stuff online, so that people have more access. Because people just aren't coming up there. And if they come, they don't want to stay very long. The beginner's mind sessions are sold out every single time. So that's been a hot topic. And it used to be that when Titian first started there, he didn't do anything less than 3 or 4 days. And he wanted to do month-longs. No one can take a month off from work to do those kinds of things. So the shorter-term practice things are working better. They're at least getting people up there to practice and bringing new people in on membership. It is not attracting people who want to live there and stay there for long term. And I think that's just the cultural shift that we're in. Fewer and fewer people are interested in organized religion and devoting themselves to that kind of spirit. And that's just the reality. I think we're going to have to figure out how we market ourselves in, because that's what's real. And so that's the shift in strategy that we're looking to now make with the overall structure of the practice. And Tension is very open to it because he's had online classes that have been very well attended, and they're attended internationally. So it gives him an opportunity to have people and talk to people that he's known for years. That there's a huge following from the Netherlands, and they often fly over to come to Session. So that's just we're adapting to the reality of the marketplace and the reality of change and getting older and moving on as it is. So that's where we are. Questions?
Sounds good.
Sounds good. So speaking of adapting, thank you so much for me. Turn this request. Please stop recording.
Sort of typically what we do in year, sort of mid-year thing. So my recommendation is send 1,000 of our affiliates 100 to coaching.
I'll second that motion.
Discussion.
You have to buy a chainsaw.
No,
Find somebody to operate the chainsaw.
Yeah. I think we have 2 chainsaws. We have electric chainsaws actually up there. No emissions. So
Yeah, no sparks either.
yeah. Well, they can spark them on a tree.
Oh, I meant with the
Yeah.
gasoline and the.
Yeah, no guy, and no spark plugs in the motor.
So all in favor?
Okay.
Second, we are done with the contract.
Ah, really? Yeah.
After a year
Yeah.
of negotiating.
And Mark, thank you. I cannot tell you. You're just amazing with these legal things that we have to deal with. And we'll appreciate your legal mind and ability to write. So
Yeah.
deep appreciation.
Right to do it. And the same thing with your coach, I made that up, just so you know, if they have legal things that need to be done or looked into.
Oh, okay.
That's my one skill.
Well, you just need more than one skill, but
So,
thank you.
yeah. So they agreed to our language about requiring the passwords to be revealed to us immediately upon changing them and to making their equipment serviceable and usable always. So Bobby is here and said she would print out a copy and get signed today and
Cool.
do that till next year.
A lot of work. Thank you.
For someone that does it every day, it's not really that bad.
Well, for the rest of it, it was overwhelming. So appreciate your being able to do that.
Okay.
Okay. Any other business? Okay.
All right, thank you, everybody.
Thank
for
you.
being flexible.
Yes. So are we back in our regular place next
Yeah,
week?
this is
This is temporary.
it's just punishment for being inside the contract.
It's just a retaliation.
To the tower.
Yeah, the tower.
So in the future, if they schedule something in the big room on a Saturday, then we have the option of, instead of not having as a thing, we can go here. Because I remember there was some week coming up when we said, oh, we won't be able to sit over there, so there won't be a.
Oh, I think that was all the streets were closed down.
Oh, yeah.
It didn't have to do with the.
No, they all,
landlord.
the deal we have, the contract is that if they don't have that space available, they have to make this available.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
that's good. So we won't.
Yeah, that other situation was you couldn't get here.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
no way to get here.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
All
I
right,
kind of
well,
like this space.
it's kind of intimate, you know?
Well, it reminds me of Atherton.
The
when we used to-
Unitarian Church.
Unitarian
Yeah.
Church.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
I think this room was actually larger than that room. That room
Yes,
was
it
really
is.
small.
It is long.
Yeah. I remember all the little chairs and other stuff on the wall and similar.
Yeah. But we did Zazenkai with 25 people in that room.
Yeah. That's what- no.
Those were the days.
All right.
All right. Thanks everybody. Thanks for helping us clean up, and you don't have as far to go.